Assalamu alaikum, let's explore this Islamic topic together. Hey, so, we were talking about the Islamic Golden Age, right? And how amazing the advancements were in science, art, and philosophy. Well, a huge part of that story is the Abbasid Caliphate, and specifically, how they ran things. Their bureaucracy, believe it or not, is a super important piece of the puzzle, even though it's not as glamorous as, say, the House of Wisdom. Think about it. You have this massive empire, stretching from Spain to Persia, a diverse population with different languages, religions, and legal systems all under one rule. How do you even begin to govern that? The Abbasids, taking over from the Umayyads in the mid-700s, basically invented a system of administration that, for its time, was revolutionary. It was all about organization. They established ministries, think of them like modern government departments, responsible for everything from tax collection to military recruitment to the postal service. Yes, they had a postal service. They had incredibly detailed record keeping, using things like early forms of accounting and even something akin to a census to manage resident populations effectively. This administrative power allowed for significant infrastructure projects, canals, roads, libraries, that helped the economy boom and facilitated cultural exchange. Picture this. A network of scribes diligently recording everything, from grain harvests to legal disputes, all meticulously organized, powering the engine of this huge empire. Pretty impressive, right? And that efficiency, it had a real impact. The Caliphate thrived economically. Trade flourished along established routes like the Silk Road, bringing in wealth from across Asia and beyond. The efficient collection of taxes funded grand projects, think magnificent mosques, hospitals, and those incredible libraries we talked about, that improved the lives of many citizens. The Abbasid Caliph himself, at least in theory, was responsible for the well-being of the entire population, a role heavily influenced by Islamic principles of social justice and stewardship. But here's the thing about power. It corrupts. Or, at least, it can corrupt. While the Abbasid bureaucracy was initially incredibly efficient, it was also susceptible to problems. Like any large organization, think about the sheer number of officials involved. There were opportunities for bribery, embezzlement, and favoritism. Imagine the pressure on someone collecting taxes, could easily be tempted to pocket a little extra for themselves, especially in far-flung provinces where oversight was weaker. And the influence of powerful families and nobles, over time, they began to dominate the administration, creating a complex web of patronage and influence. This meant that appointments weren't always merit, but on connections and loyalty. Instead of qualified individuals holding positions, you'd see less competent people in crucial roles because they happened to be related to or friends with someone important. This inevitably led to a decrease in efficiency and a rise in inequality. This corruption had a direct impact on society. If tax revenue was siphoned off, it meant less money for public works, less funding for the army, and potentially even higher taxes on the ordinary people to make up for the losses. This led to resentment, instability, and ultimately contributed to the weakening of the Caliphate. It's a classic case of a system initially designed to serve the people becoming a tool for self-enrichment for a select few. Plus, the enormous bureaucracy itself, while initially efficient, became unwieldy and sluggish over time. The sheer complexity of the system could make it difficult to react quickly to challenges, like internal rebellions or external threats. Think of it like a giant ship, initially graceful and swift, but becoming increasingly difficult to maneuver as it grew larger and more complex. Now, it's important to remember that this wasn't a simple story of good versus evil. The Abbasid bureaucracy wasn't inherently corrupt, it was a complex system with both strengths and weaknesses, reflecting the human nature of those who operated within it. It was a system that adapted to a changing environment, with different periods of greater and lesser efficiency and transparency. There were certainly dedicated officials who served honestly and effectively, alongside those who abused their positions. The story of the Abbasid bureaucracy is a reminder that even the most well-intentioned systems can fall prey to internal contradictions and human ills. But it's also a testament to the ambition and organizational capabilities of the Abbasid Caliphate. Their attempt to create a sophisticated system of governance, however flawed in its execution, profoundly shaped the course of Islamic history and contributed to the remarkable cultural flourishing of the Golden Age. So, understanding their bureaucracy is crucial to understanding the whole picture. Hey, so, you want to hear about the Abbasid Caliphate? Specifically, the crazy, amazing, sometimes infuriating bureaucracy they built? Okay, buckle up, because it's a wild ride. Imagine this. It's the 8th century. The Islamic world is exploding with new ideas, new wealth, new everything. The Umayyad Caliphate, which had been in charge, is, well, let's just say it wasn't exactly beloved by everyone. They were seen as a bit too ed on themselves and their fancy lifestyles. Then, boom, the Abbasids rise up, promising a fairer, more just rule, and they brought a whole new approach to governing. What started it all was a desire for organization. The Umayyads had a system, sure, but the Abbasids envisioned something far grander. Think of it like this. The Umayyad system was a small family business that got unexpectedly huge. The Abbasids were aiming for a multinational corporation, a sprawling, complex machine designed to administer a vast empire stretching from Spain to modern-day Afghanistan. This meant a serious upgrade to their administration. The Abbasids understood that you can't rule such a huge territory just by shouting orders. They needed officials, departments, specialized roles, a whole network of people dedicated to keeping things running. This is where the bureaucracy came in. They created this incredible system of ministries, each with its own responsibilities. You had departments for taxes, for the army, for public works. Imagine building roads and irrigation canals across a continent. And even for things like postal services. They were incredibly sophisticated for their time. Think of it as the first real attempt at a modern civil service. Although obviously without the modern trappings. The early years were truly remarkable. There was a real sense of efficiency. The Abbasids were meticulous record keepers. Imagine massive libraries, filled with documents detailing everything from land ownership to trade routes. This level of organization allowed for efficient tax collection, which in turn funded massive public works projects, mosques, hospitals, libraries, and even the development of amazing new technologies, like advanced irrigation systems that made agriculture flourish. This period saw a true golden age of Islamic culture and learning, fueled in no small part by this effective bureaucratic machine. Scholars and artists flourished under the patronage of the caliphs, leading to incredible advancements in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. Think of Al-Khwarizmi and his contributions to algebra. But, as with any large, powerful system, corruption crept in. Imagine the potential for abuse. The tax collectors, for instance, had the power to significantly impact the lives of ordinary people. Bribery became a problem. Officials started favoring their friends and family, awarding contracts to those willing to pay a little extra under the table. Patronage became a significant factor, where connections and loyalty mattered more than merit. The more the bureaucracy grew, the more complex the system became, and the more opportunities there were for exploitation. It's a common story, really. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. As the Caliphate grew older and wealthier, the internal squabbling intensified. Different factions vied for power, using the bureaucracy as a tool to undermine their rivals. Appointments were political connections rather than competency, leading to inefficiency and widespread dissatisfaction. The system that once drove innovation and progress began to stifle it. Think of it as a beautiful machine gradually rusting and breaking down from the inside. The social impact was huge. While the early Abbasid Caliphate saw a period of relative prosperity and social mobility, the growing corruption affected everyone. Farmers were overtaxed. Merchants faced unfair competition from those with connections, and ordinary people became disillusioned with the system. The gap between the rich and the poor widened, leading to social unrest. The story of the Abbasid bureaucracy isn't just a story of administrative structures. It's a reflection of the complex interplay between power, efficiency, and human nature. It's a cautionary tale, really. A reminder that even the most well-intentioned systems can become corrupted, and that the pursuit of order can sometimes lead to injustice. It's also a fascinating example of how a society's organization can shape its culture, its economy, and the lives of ordinary people. And, honestly, it's a story that still resonates today. We still grapple with the challenges of building effective and equitable systems of governance. And the Abbasid experience offers a powerful reminder of the pitfalls to avoid and the ideals to strive for. So, there you have it, a whirlwind tour of the Abbasid bureaucracy. Any questions? Hey, so, we were talking about the Abbasid Caliphate, right? Remember how it started with this incredible burst of energy, this golden age of learning and art and everything amazing after the somewhat stricter Umayyad Caliphate? Well, things get really interesting when we look at how they actually ran the whole massive empire. Think about it, we're talking a territory stretching from parts of modern-day Spain all the way to Persia and beyond, a crazy diverse population, all under one rule. Managing that required a seriously impressive bureaucracy. And impressive it was. The Abbasids built a system of government that, in its prime, was seriously advanced for its time. They had specialized ministries, think finance, the post office, yes, really, even departments on things like public works and irrigation. Imagine the scale. They needed people to collect taxes, manage the massive treasury, which, by the way, sometimes held more gold than anyone could even begin to count, and make sure the army was supplied. They had a sophisticated postal system, connecting all corners of the empire, enabling communication and trade that was unheard of in much of the world at the time. This efficient administration, at its best, led to incredible achievements. Think of the construction of amazing mosques, libraries filled with ancient knowledge, and the translation movement that brought Greek philosophy and science into the Arabic world. This was a period of intense intellectual exchange and flourishing, fueled by the bureaucratic engine making it all possible. It was genuinely a remarkable organizational feat. But, and a big but, like any complex system, the Abbasid bureaucracy was vulnerable. The problems didn't come from a lack of structure. It was more about how people interacted with that structure. Power corrupts, right? And absolute power corrupts absolutely. As the Caliphate grew wealthier and more powerful, corruption became a serious issue. Imagine the possibilities for those in charge of tax collection. A little bit of skimming here. A slightly inflated invoice there. It adds up. And quickly. We're talking about a system where officials could, and often did, use their positions to enrich themselves at the expense of the people. Bribery was rampant. Patronage networks, where officials would favor those who showed them loyalty, rather than selecting merit, became entrenched. It's like a kind of office politics on a gigantic scale, with life-altering consequences. Think of someone in to get a fair hearing in court, if they didn't have connections or money to grease the wheels. Justice might be far out of reach. This corruption had a massive social impact. It meant that taxes, which were essential for funding public services like irrigation systems and infrastructure, weren't always reaching where they were needed. Farmers, who were the backbone of the economy, could be squeezed dry by greedy officials, leading to hardship and resentment. This created instability and could even lead to revolts. The more powerful the central government became, the more ways there were for things to go wrong. The potential for corruption grew exponentially. Religion, too, played a complex role. Islam, with its emphasis on justice and fairness, was clearly at odds with the widespread corruption. While many officials were devout Muslims, the temptation of power and wealth proved too strong for many others. This led to a kind of hypocrisy where religious ideals were often contradicted by the reality of everyday governance. Clerics themselves sometimes got caught up in the system, gaining influence and wealth, sometimes blurring the lines between religious authority and political power. It wasn't a simple case of religious people versus corrupt officials. It was far more nuanced than that. Then there was the issue of regionalism. The vastness of the empire meant that different regions had their own distinct cultures and identities, while the Abbasid Caliphate aimed for unity. This often clashed with local traditions and power structures. Some regions felt marginalized or overlooked by the central government, leading to tensions and even rebellions. It became a challenge balancing central authority with local needs and autonomy. And the bureaucratic system, however sophisticated, sometimes had to bridge the gap. The story of the Abbasid Caliphate's bureaucracy isn't just one of efficiency and progress. It's also a story of how even the most well-structured systems can be undermined by human beings. It's a reminder that power, without checks and balances, is a dangerous thing. The Abbasid Caliphate's eventual decline can partly be attributed to this gradual erosion of trust in the government, fueled by rampant corruption and the widening gap between the rulers and the ruled. It's a cautionary tale about the importance of good governance, the dangers of unchecked power, and the enduring tension between ideals and reality. And it's a powerful example of how complex societies, even impressive ones, are never simply stories of triumph. They always have their messy, human, and deeply fascinating middle chapters. Hey, so we've been talking about the Abbasid Caliphate, right? This incredible period in Islamic history. A golden age in many ways. We've covered how they took over from the Umayyads, built Baghdad, fostered incredible intellectual and artistic flourishing. But let's talk about the engine that drove it all, the bureaucracy. Because, like any large, powerful empire, it wasn't just about great art and amazing libraries. It was about how they actually ran the show. And that's where things get fascinating. Imagine an empire stretching from modern-day Spain all the way to Persia, encompassing diverse cultures, religions, and languages. You need a seriously impressive system to keep everything ticking over, taxes collected, justice dispensed, armies supplied, borders defended. The Abbasids built just that, a vast, complex bureaucracy. In its early days, it was pretty impressive, honestly. Think highly organized departments, efficient postal services. Seriously, they were ahead of their time. And a well-defined system of collecting taxes and distributing res. They had specialized officials for everything: finance, law, administration, and a sophisticated system of record keeping. It was all based, in part, on Persian administrative models. The Abbasids were smart to adapt existing systems and improve upon them. This efficiency allowed them to fund massive public works projects, like canals and hospitals, and support vast scholarly networks. Think the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, a true center of learning. It fueled their cultural achievements, the translation movement, the growth of Islamic philosophy and science. All needed the reliable backbone of a functioning bureaucracy. But empire, like people, have their ups and downs, right? And this vast machine started to show its cracks. The sheer size of the empire, the growing wealth, and the complexities of managing such diverse populations made it ripe for corruption. Think about it: officials dealing with enormous sums of money, vast power concentrated in their hands. Temptation was everywhere. Bribery became commonplace. Tax collectors skimmed off the top. Judges were influenced by bribes. And appointments to powerful positions often went to the highest bidder rather than the most competent person. Favoritism and nepotism flourished. Officials placed family members and friends in key roles, regardless of qualifications. This wasn't just a few bad apples, either. It became systemic, eating away at the very foundations of the empire. And here's the kicker: this wasn't just some abstract problem of governance. It had a massive impact on the lives of ordinary people. Imagine being a farmer, struggling to make ends meet, and then having a corrupt tax collector demanding exorbitant fees, leaving you with barely enough to survive. Or picture a merchant, cheated out of his profits by a bribed judge. These kinds of injustices weren't isolated incidents. They chipped away at the trust between the ruling elite and the population. As the empire grew older, the bureaucracy became increasingly bloated and inefficient. Too many layers of officials meant endless paperwork, delays, and a general slowing down of everything. It became almost impossible to hold officials accountable, as corruption had spread so deeply. This created a climate of instability and uncertainty, further weakening the empire's ability to respond to internal revolts and external threats. The Abbasid Caliphate eventually fractured into smaller, weaker states. This wasn't solely because of bureaucratic dysfunction, of course. There were other factors at play, like external invasions from the Seljuks and the Mongols, internal power struggles, and the rise of other powerful Islamic states. But the decay of the efficient bureaucracy played a significant role in the empire's decline. The once smooth-running machine became clogged, rusted, and eventually ground to a halt. Think of it like this: the Abbasid Caliphate, at its peak, was a beautifully designed clock, incredibly complex and intricate, running with impressive precision. But over time, the gears became worn, the springs weakened, and the lubricants dried up. Corruption was the rust that ate away at its vital components, ultimately leading to its malfunction and eventual disintegration. It's a cautionary tale, really, a reminder that even the most impressive systems can be undermined by internal decay. And that good governance isn't just about grand schemes but also about the everyday details of accountability and fairness. It's a powerful reminder of the delicate balance between power, efficiency, and the human element in shaping history. What a story, right? Hey, so we were talking about the Abbasid Caliphate, right? Amazing period, huh? Think Baghdad, the city of 1001 nights. But beyond the shimmering stories and legendary libraries, the Abbasids had something really fascinating going on. Their bureaucracy. And honestly, thinking about it now, it's got some pretty powerful lessons for us today. You know, the Abbasids took over from the Umayyads. And one of their big things was establishing this massive administrative system. Imagine an empire stretching from Spain all the way to modern-day Afghanistan. That's a lot to manage. They needed officials to collect taxes, oversee trade, administer justice, even deal with irrigation projects, the whole shebang. They set up different ministries and departments. And it was genuinely impressive in its scale for its time. Think of it like a super early version of a modern government. Albeit with, some serious differences. The efficiency part is really striking. They developed a system of postal services. Imagine the speed of getting information across such a huge area. They had standardized weights and measures, which made trade much smoother. Think about the impact on things like agriculture. Knowing you're getting a fair deal is huge for farmers. They even implemented sophisticated accounting systems to track the finances of the empire. So, in many ways, they were ahead of their time in terms of organization and administrative prowess. It's a testament to how much they valued order and a functioning state. They weren't just bent on conquering. They were actively building a system to sustain their power and improve the lives of their people. At least in theory. But, and a big but, no system is perfect, especially when you're dealing with human beings. Corruption, unfortunately, was a major issue. We're talking bribery, embezzlement, favoritism, the whole sordid lot. Officials would often exploit their positions for personal gain, squeezing money from the population, ignoring the needs of the people. Think about the impact on people who couldn't afford to bribe their way out of problems. It must have been incredibly frustrating and unjust. Imagine someone needing a permit to build a house, only to find themselves having to pay multiple officials extra fees just to get it approved. Or someone struggling to get justice in court because they couldn't afford to bribe the right people. This wasn't just a matter of a few bad apples either. It became a systemic issue, eroding the trust between the government and the population. It's a stark reminder that even the most well-structured systems can be undermined by human greed and corruption. And sadly, this echoes even today, right? We see similar struggles with corruption even in modern, developed nations. Now, the social impact was really complex. On one hand, the efficiency of the bureaucracy, when it worked well, contributed to economic prosperity. There was a flourishing of trade, intellectual pursuits, and artistic expression during the golden age of the Abbasids. Think about the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, a center of learning that attracted scholars from all over the world. This golden age was directly supported by the underlying, mostly efficient bureaucracy. But the corruption also had a devastating impact. It led to inequality, social unrest, and ultimately, contributed to the decline of the Caliphate. When people don't trust their government, when they feel like the system is rigged against them, it weakens the entire structure. It breeds resentment, and eventually, that resentment can boil over. This is something we see repeated throughout history. Strong centralized power, unchecked, leads to imbalance and, eventually, societal breakdown. So, what does all this teach Muslims today? I think there are a few key takeaways. Firstly, the importance of good governance and accountability. The Abbasids showed that a well-structured bureaucracy can achieve amazing things. But it needs to be run ethically and fairly. Strong institutions are essential, but those institutions must be transparent and serve the people, not just a select few. We see this emphasized repeatedly in Islamic teachings about justice, fairness, and the responsibility of leaders to their people. Secondly, the constant vigilance needed to fight corruption. It's a persistent threat to any society, regardless of its structure. This isn't just about catching corrupt officials. It's about fostering a culture of integrity and transparency. It's about establishing systems that make corruption difficult to hide and difficult to get away with. Finally, the importance of remembering the lessons of history. The Abbasid story isn't just about a powerful empire. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the vital importance of upholding justice and fairness in all aspects of society. Their successes and yours are a rich of reflection, reminding us that building a just and prosperous society requires constant effort, vigilance, and a commitment to the principles of fairness and accountability, which are central tenets of Islamic beliefs. And those are principles that transcend time and place, aren't they? Goodbye. May Allah bless us all. That's our discussion for today.